So welcome to the final session of Career Bootcamp 2023. Power Panel, Ask Me Anything. That's this session. If there's something we missed or a theme that caught your interest, don't hesitate to ask our panel your toughest questions. Please note that this session will be offered in both English and French simultaneously. To access the French session, please refer to the V-Expo agenda and click on the corresponding link for Méga Panel Demandez-nous ce que vous voulez. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional, unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you're on as well. Career Bootcamp is the largest conference in the Government of Canada, dedicated to supporting you on your career journey. During today's session, please share your questions using the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen in your preferred language of your choice. You can also vote for questions you like by clicking the thumbs up button. The most voted questions will be answered first. As with all of our Fin sessions, this session will be recorded for future reference and to revisit any insights shared. So I would first like to introduce myself. It's an honor to be your moderator for today's session. So I am the project officer for the Federal Youth Network and the lead for communication on the communications team. Previously, I was HR coordinator and staffing at Infrastructure Canada and the lead for the student program at Indigenous Services Canada. So I would like to also start with some learning objectives and a quick poll just to see where we're at for the audience. Your answers are anonymous. So I'll let you answer the questions to the poll, and then we will share the answers and the results, and we'll just check it out. So for today's learning objective is just to answer any outstanding or emerging questions from the audience that resulted from the 2 weeks of Career Bootcamp 2023. All right, so I'll just give a few moments for the poll. I see a lot of things coming in. All right. So we have the results here. The first question was, how many Career Bootcamp sessions did you attend this year? Sorry, apologies. 25%, which is the highest amount, said a couple, 2 to 4. That's pretty good. That's half. The second question, did you come prepared with questions? So the highest or the top rated answer was at 83%, I just want to listen in, which is totally okay. So I would like to introduce or let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Andy Pittman. Andy, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, bonjour à tous. Je suis Andy Pittman. J'utilise les pronoms il, and she, her, theirs. I'm working on my French, so I thought I'd start off with that, but this is the English session. So I'm a human-centered designer, the lead at the Center for Diversity and Inclusion within the Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer within Treasury Board Secretariat. It's taken me a while to get that. I have been in the public service for 4 years now, so I'm still in my young professional in the public service days. So I will be, I think, relying on the wisdom of Jen and Aloha to supplement today, but I'm happy to contribute where I can, and perhaps also maybe include some of the private sector perspective for those who may come in and out. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So I'd like for Jen McDougall to introduce herself next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jen McDougall. I'm one of Canada's free agents. I'm currently on assignment with the Federal Youth Network as the Senior Manager of Events and Partnerships. What that means is I design events like Career Bootcamp. I'm on a lot of committees and a lot of networks. I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what new public servants are looking for, as well as what's happening across the GC landscape. I've had dream jobs I've also had some not so dreamy jobs, and I've made it part of my career mandate and goal to help other people find dream jobs within the GC. So I'm happy to share any insight that I have. I have taught courses on this for a long time, but I'm not an expert in HR. I only know what I know. So hopefully that'll be enough. And if not, I'm sure Loa's going to call me out.
Love it. Thank you, Jen. And actually up next is Loa Lumbala. If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. So mon nom est Loa Lumbala. I'd like to start by saying I'm Francophone. So if you hear me say a word and you just don't know what I said, it's okay. Someone will translate for me. So I worked a lot in HR. I am not an HR expert, I would say, but I know a lot about all the HR policies, and especially in staffing. I was a recruiter at ESDC. I was a team leader in the recruitment team, and before that, I did work at TDS. But in HRSD, which is like the human resource division. And I've worked in a learning group also in court administration services. Now I work as a senior program advisor for the Canadian Pension Plan, which is really different, but I really, in my heart, I really support diversity and inclusion. So the fact that I'm working in a program that is for persons with a disability, I think I'm still in that area. I'm also the Visible Minority Network representative for ESDC. So if you have a question in French, don't hesitate to just write it in French. I'll be able to read and answer it. And I will also, j'attends aussi de envoyer des questions à Andy puis à Jen en français. Thank you.
Thank you, Loa. And last but not least, Joshua Frame, if you could introduce yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks very much. Happy to be on this panel. And I think this is my going on 8 years being involved in Career Bootcamp, first in a regional perspective, and now as the national chair of the Federal Youth Network. And I'm just happy to see really how it's grown. But what I can give input on today is probably almost anything in some ways. If you have HR questions, if you have hiring questions, if you have kind of like hacking the system questions, and I see one of our top questions is about getting to be a director in 5 years. I don't know how to do that, but if somebody does, then that certainly could be helpful. But overall, the Federal Youth Network is here to help you in your career. So that's what we're hoping to deliver with this session, and we hope that you stay engaged with the Federal Youth Network going forward. I think we've created an organization that has a lot of dream jobs within it. And that wasn't the case 6 years ago. 6 years ago, it wasn't even a dream job for me to be the national chair of the FYN, as I spent mornings being the national chair of the FYN, afternoons being a service renewal manager for the Canada Revenue Agency, and trying to inspire on one hand and reorganize workforce adjustment on the other. So all that to say, there are lots of possibilities in your career to create your dream job and create your dream organization. So hopefully we'll get to lots of those questions today.
Thank you, Josh. Well, what an amazing panel, talented panelists. This is so exciting. And what I love about this session is we're going to get right into the questions by the audience. So first, top rated question asked by the audience is, do you know how many people are able to move up from a, say, entry level, and in 5 years, they are now my director? Is there a secret I am missing? Pools and jobs take years through jobs.ca to be hired. So are they getting promotions that aren't even advertised? Great question. Who would like to start us off today?
Maybe I'll jump in on this one, if that's all right, and then pass it to my fellow panelists. I think there are very few, if any, folks who are rising up from like a PM1, PM2 entry-level position to be a director in 5 years. There might be some exceptions to that. I think for the most part, at the senior level, sometimes we see people who came in on sort of some earlier career development programs where they might have started off at like an EX-1 because they had a PhD or they were a Rhodes Scholar or something like that. But for the most part, you don't really see that. And realistically, if you go from entry level to director in 5 years, the question is, how are you going to direct people when you may not have that much knowledge of the public service or the organization, or a leadership experience? So definitely, I think at the FYN, we don't preach, try to get as fast, as high up the echelon as you possibly can, because that's not good for you and it's not good for the organization. Jen?
I think I have two thoughts. Often in the federal public service, all of us have seen it. There are tons of people who are grossly overqualified for their role. So some people take a very entry level position just to get their foot in the door, and they're overqualified. So they do move up more quickly. So there's that. I think that when I saw the question, the first thing that struck me is, who wants to be a director? Like, I'm not striving to be a director, but so that's something to think about. Like, why do you want to be a director? Is it the money? Is it the title? Is it the cachet of being part of Apex because you're an executive? Like, why do you want to be there? Because you can make lots of money, and I dare say at the EX-1, they say they make more money than an actual EX. So think about why you're trying to get there. But if you want to know how people are getting there, I would say probably often that's we're hiring people who are overqualified. Loa.
Yeah, I would like to add that, we have tendency to think that, you want to go high really fast. Sometimes when you climb really fast in the ladder, you'll have a hard time once you get to that level. It might become really challenging because either of the lack of experience or the lack of network. I always preach like the village, right? So we don't know everything, but if you only spend only a couple of years or months in the position and then move up, how are you building yourself? How are you building your knowledge? How are you building your network? How are you building your reputation, right? So it's good to go up. For me, I really encourage people to go up. If you want to become a director, good luck. EX-1 is not as as glamorous as one may think sometimes, depending on who you work for and who you work with. But you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep in mind also of the number of experience that you gain, because when you become a director, there's a lot more expectation from you, and your employee do not have time to, I would say, tolerate all of your failure in a contrary that if you're only an employee or a manager. So keep that in mind while you want to become a director. That's it for me.
That's great advice from great panelists. Thank you. So Andy, if you have something you'd like to say, you can say it now. If not, I can move on to the next question. It's okay if you don't. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Next question. With the recent RTO order, many federal employees working in the regions are concerned about career development. Do you think that managers will be willing to staff NCR positions with regional workers and seek exemptions for them? Or do you think they will be more willing to hire from within the NCR? Great question.
I'll take it first because I think I'm the only one in a region. So I have been in a region my entire GC career, and being in a region has never gotten in the way of me growing my career. Now, maybe it's luck, but it has just worked out that way for me. My colleagues in the region who are moving around and moving up since and during the pandemic say that they sometimes have to report to an office where there aren't the people that they work with. There are just other people who are physically located in this space. But if that's all you need to do to check that box, then you can go hang out with these people and have coffee while the people that you're working with are there, if that's what they need you to do. So I don't think that RTO is necessarily going to impact people in the regions that way. I think it's just going to impact all of us in a different way. But go Okro.
I think what I'm seeing is all of this stuff is kind of coming to a head right now. So I think I'm seeing a lot of uncertainty. But if we think about the before times, it seems like, different organizations have different kind of priorities and different lines of business that make it make more sense to hire regional employees versus I know at Treasury Board Secretariat, there is a strong culture and preference for having people be in the NCR. So I think that there's probably going to be some stabilization that occurs, and it seems like things will probably go back to the way things were before, like in terms of that approach. I don't know for sure, but that's my prediction going forward. So if you're getting a sense, I think there's a bit of a reaction, a bit of a some maybe panic for some people on this item, but I think things will start to resolve itself, and I don't know that it will be as differing impact than it was before, but just my sense, don't know for sure.
And maybe I'll just chime in quickly to say, I split my career between the Ontario region and the National Capital Region. And in the Ontario region, I needed to be a lot more networked and make a lot more conscious effort to know the jobs that were sort of in the area, know the jobs that were the executives, know the leaders who were like around the region who I wanted to work for in the future. That was much more key because it wasn't really a case of, I could just post my resume and 10 people would want to hire me. I had to apply for, 6 jobs, 8 jobs, 10 jobs to like maybe get into one. And there are a lot, less jobs at this more senior levels. So you really like need to focus on building your network, showing your value, be on, social media, whether it's LinkedIn or whatever, like make sure that you're a known quantity in your region, because that's how you get to those more senior positions and get those managers who want to make an exception to hire you, even though they have an NCR team, but they know you're fantastic.
Well said. I totally agree. Loa, would you like to jump in?
Yes, I just want to say to those who are new in the public service who just arrived during pandemic, there's we're federal, so since it's a federal government, we're all like coast to coast. There's a lot of department, ESDC, DFO, I think, and CBSC that have office in the region. So if you are on Facebook, I don't know, yes, most of them who are on Facebook, they're posting about those positions. I know that RCC has an office in Montreal, they're hiring in Montreal. So go on social media, just like Joshua said, go on social media and see what managers are posting. Don't only look at the post, but also read the comments. You will see and notice a lot of people are always commenting, oh, send me a resume. We have an office in Montreal. We have an office in Vancouver. Like, really do your research, and it's possible to navigate and grow your career while you're in the region.
Yes, I'm glad that was mentioned. Definitely a little secret that should not be a secret in the GOC. All right, so next question for the panelists. And it's actually been really close. Like the top question has been flipping a lot. So I love that. I love the engagement. Okay, so how to navigate family leave when you're a young person without kids or elderly parents. In theory, everyone should be able to use it equally to support work-life balance. However, my collective agreement only specifies using it for children, elderly parent-related circumstances. As a young person, I'd like to be able to use it for immediate family events, but I am not sure this is universally understood. Any advice? Josh.
Sure, maybe I'll just jump in to say, the idea about leave is not that everyone uses it equally. It's that it's there if you need it. So sick leave, people don't use sick leave equally. We each get 15 days a year. Some people use all 15 days a year. Some people use 0. That doesn't mean that we get sort of a different entitlement. It's just a matter of it's there when you need it. It's kind of like an insurance policy, right? So family related leave, look into your collective agreement and how it specifies the definition of family. Usually it can include if you have a live-in partner, that sort of stuff. So kind of look at that definition and exactly what it encompasses. And see if you do have times where it can be used for that. But just remember that really this is to help you in that situation. Similarly, if we even if we looked at bereavement leave or something, that's not applied sort of exactly equally because of the definition of family. And so sometimes people are like, well, my, uncle passed away and that's not in the definition of family, but this would be. Well, it sort of doesn't matter. It's there to really protect you in that situation.
Thank you, Josh. Other panelists like to add? Nope, that's totally okay. All right, thank you so much, Josh. Next question, top question. I see a real focus on who you know and getting exposure. Is that really fair? Good question. Who would like to start that? Jen.
Yes, I'll start if
Well,
nobody
Andy.
wants to start. Oh, Andy put her hand up first. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, Andy.
As someone who normally would probably not be hired by the public service, who's in a really kind of new and emerging field within government, I have had to really make network and share my work publicly. So Twitter has been a big channel for me. And I think a lot of people know me from Twitter. and that is how I've gotten every opportunity, is through non-advertised, either secondment and deployment. It's been a key tool for me to kind of get those roles. And those staffing flexibilities exist for those reasons, because unfortunately our HR systems are a little out of date, maybe. It can create some barriers. I know it has in my career. So I really rely on the staffing flexibilities that exist. And a big part of that is building your network and having a voice and being a leader in the space. And that has served me significantly. So I think those connections and those relationships, especially early on, can help you find the dream job. I've heard that shared. And I think it's just important for us to participate in a broader community. I really believe in one team gov as a message. But obviously, we're still about merit, qualifications, and also being really inclusive in our hiring. And so I think there's a balance to be struck, but I definitely think my network, I would not be able to really be here without the connections that I've built.
Thank you, Andy. That was really well said. Loa?
I want to add, in terms of the word, is it fairly fair? Just what Andy just shared, that's a lot of work. To have to go on Twitter, to have to post what you're working on, that is the work that you do when you're applying on Juicy Jobs. You have to talk about your work. You have to talk about your experience. You have to show that you have the competency. So I think when we're looking at the word fair, is it fair? It's find your way to be acknowledged based on merit. Because we were able to see the work that they did, then we hired Andy, right? So I think when we're looking at fair, it's what is fair? I personally will not be able to post on Twitter 24/7. I tried, but it's a lot of work. So when we're talking about fairness, and I love the fact that we're trying to relook at the word when we're looking at inclusivity. What does it mean? How do we recognize the work of someone, the competency of someone? So that's my 2 cents when it comes to the word fair. I'd like people to think a little bit more than what we've been provided with.
No, thank you so much. That was, I totally agree. And I love the wisdom being shared right now. So off to the next question. What's a piece of career advice that you hear, but you think is outdated or no longer relevant?
I'll say that it has to be do your time. I come from, my grandparents were public servants, my parents were public servants, and in those days you put in your time. And when Bob retired, Joe got that job. And then when Joe retired, maybe you could have that job, but you couldn't take the first one. You had to wait your time and do your time. And I think we don't see that now. And I think that was addressed in one of the earlier questions about people moving up to the senior ranks really quickly. You can design your career path any way you want. It doesn't have to be step by step by step. It can be, we did a session this week on lateral moves. It can be a couple steps over. It can be a step or two down. We had a session that they talked about that as well. So I think that for me is one thing that strikes me, because I even still hear my parents saying things like that about, no, do your time, do your time. You don't need to do that. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do my time. I want to do this instead. So I think that's the one that I don't like the most.
That's fair. Andy?
For me, and maybe this is a bit ambitious, but dress for the job you want. I would like to believe, and I know this is probably not consistent, but I'd like to believe that more and more we're being more open to authentic selves, bringing your whole self to work, being comfortable, being able to express yourself. So, I'm wearing a blue collared shirt. I'm kind of dressing the role I recognize. But in my day-to-day, I'm trying to encourage like being comfortable, like tight pants that are like restricting, like, can we just move on a little bit, and can our work not speak for ourselves, and step it up, as Tan France from Queer Eye would say, like, be stepped up, a stepped up version of yourself. But do we all need to be wearing suits in in gray, black, monochrome colors? Like, I hope not. I hope we're moving away from that. And I hope that that's RTO, like the pandemic has helped us really kind of be like, yeah, it's great working in sweatpants. Can we have like a nice little, not quite a sweatpant, but like a dress pant that's a sweatpant? I've found one of those and I love wearing them. So if we're not there yet, that's what I'm rooting for in the future.
Yes, I'm really glad that Andy mentioned that, and Jen's point as well, because I think that we don't talk about that enough in the GOC personally. So thank you for sharing. I think I'm going to move on to the next question. What are strategies for career development for public servants working in regions who are not looking to relocate to Ottawa? Majority of opportunities I find interesting are based in Ottawa, despite working remote and then hybrid for the past 3 years.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in on this one. I think first off to say, if the opportunity you're looking at is something more like a deployment or an at-level assignment, there's nothing really to stop you from contacting that manager and saying, hey, I saw that you just posted for, a PM4. I'm a PM4 working from the region. I found this job really interesting. Would you be interested in having me seconded to this role, or, doing the staffing a different way? That can work. I've done that when I was a regional employee. I contacted the hiring manager. I was in a pool for the NCR, but I said, I'm not in the NCR. I'm not looking to relocate to the NCR. I just relocated away from the NCR, but would you be open to having a remote employee? You can also do some research on that team. So if like your particular dream job posts, do some research on that team and see, by area code, you can figure out in GEDS, where are they located? Is their team already distributed across Canada? And if so, well, then maybe that hiring manager is more open to that. So that was what I did back in 2014. I contacted the hiring manager. I said, half your team seems to be in Summerside, PEI. Could I work from Toronto? And the manager was like, oh, sure. Like, yeah, that sounds great. Sure, let's do that. So I think we're seeing, as we talked about earlier, we're seeing some of these areas of selections kind of close up. I think this is kind of a temporary blip, where managers and directors and senior management are kind of sort of closing what was relatively open for 3 years, and then it will reopen. Maybe not to the same extent as during the pandemic, but a lot better than it was in 2019, hopefully.
Thank you, Josh. Jen?
I do see there is an overcorrection, and I think that's what we're seeing now. They're kind of trying to tighten that up. And when Andy mentioned TBS, it's funny because TBS didn't used to hire anyone in the region, because if you ever saw anyone in a region who was from TBS, people would talk about them when they would walk in. Oh my God, that person's from TBS. But now I actually have friends in TBS I don't know how they snuck in, but now I don't know what TBS is going to do if they want to tighten that back up, because there's already people out here. And like Josh was saying, and now that's happening. So that's the example. There's no reason you can't work from Iqaluit if someone can work from Moncton. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I think you don't know what you can get unless you ask for it. So my strategy is usually make them want you so bad that they will accommodate wherever you live. That's just my strategy. But you can ask them ahead of time before they fall in love with you. But I rather make them fall in love with me before I ask for what I want. It's totally up to you.
Those are great points. And that's why this is the Power Panel. All right, so moving on to the next question. We have heard a lot about hiring through social media in Career Bootcamp this year. I always thought the only way to get a new position / promotion within the government was making an application through official processes like jobs.gc.ca or CRA's My Candidate profile. Are those of us not reaching out directly to hiring managers or through social media at a disadvantage? Great question.
Can I start? I don't want to say yes, but when you think about the concept of posters on job and CRA, is we have two positions. And let's say we're looking at a external advertise, so everyone in Canada. We have two positions available, and they have 500 people applying. If you're one of the 500 people, once you apply, you're qualified. How would you help yourself get that one position or one of those two positions, right? So yes, once you're qualified, being qualified in a pool, think about it like a certificate or a license to be part of the PM1 or the PM3 or whatever group and level you applied. Now it's your job to try to find a job at that group and level. The manager may be interested in your position, but it's also your responsibility. One of the advantages, I think the effort that the government is doing is providing access to the pool to other managers that are looking to fill the position. But I do believe it is really important for yourself, if you want to be able to at least enter the government, is to promote that you're in this pool. Say, I have a license, look, I've been approved, and that will help you a lot. So,
Absolutely. Maybe I'll jump in. Just to say, are you at a disadvantage if you're not using that? I would say yes, because you're limiting the ways in which you can get into that position. Using casual hiring as an example. So back in like 2007, 2008, I had just graduated. I was looking to get into government, and there was no system in place for trying to get a casual contract. It was really like your friend, heard about an opportunity, and maybe you would get referred through that. And there was no way for you to really just post and say, hey, I'm Josh, I'm bilingual, I have a degree, I have, this experience, and I'm looking, for a career path in this. And a hiring manager could say, oh, great, I'm looking for somebody with that experience who has, your language profile, all that sort of stuff. There was no system for that. There still, in some ways, is no system for that. But the Facebook groups have helped to sort of hack that process a little bit. We at the Federal Youth Network just hired somebody off a Facebook group who's a casual, way overqualified, super smart, lots of experience, lots of qualifications, just looking to get into government. And the process from seeing their profile to contacting them and interviewing them was a total of 16 hours. And I don't mean 16 hours of time spent. I mean 16 hours of contacting them at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, interviewing them Friday morning, and deciding that, yes, they were a good fit for the team and we would go forward with a casual contract. Back in the day, it would have been you sent out your resume maybe to somebody, and maybe you heard back and maybe you didn't. And anyways, so you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't know about stuff like the Facebook groups, if you're not marketing yourself on anything other than jobs.gc.ca, because that's only one of the ways to get a job in the government.
I think I'd add to what Josh just said, just a shameless plug for the Federal Youth Network. If you follow the Federal Youth Network, we tell you where you should be looking for those jobs. So that helps you also to have the advantage because we keep our finger on the pulse so that you don't have to try to figure out what's going on. So we tell you the things that other people don't know to tell you. They don't know what's going on. Your manager might not even know.
I think Jen froze. But that's okay.
All good. All good.
Amazing. Thank you. 3 of you, 4 of you. So we're going to move on to the next question, get as many answers as possible today. All right. So next question, how many times can you change jobs before you look flaky? Who wants to go? Andy.
Sorry, my raise hand button froze. I'll just share like a little story about someone I know who like moved very quickly, like less than a year for several years. And they kind of joked about it whenever they would talk about it, but it never hindered their career because they were so like such a kind of an expert in their field, really well respected, very well networked, very integrated in the community. And so I think there's some affordance of people, I think in government recognize that it's pretty fluid, like unlike the private sector. I think it's really fluid. Like we've mentioned some of the staffing flexibilities, like there's I think a lot of turnover in government. So I think it's a little less destigmatized. And I think especially if you're in kind of one of those more niche fields, it can be hard to get a good fit when you're like in a culture change role, which was the case for this person. So maybe it's a bit industry dependent, but I think I don't know if there's a time, and I don't know if anyone else on the panel who's actually been a manager has a different answer, but I know that there seems to be a lot more affordance for that kind of quick changing in succession than say the private sector.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in to say I think the flakiness comes from employees who don't accomplish something in a role. Who go like spend 7 months, 9 months in a project. The project is only halfway done and they leave and they go to do something else because they got a promotion. That is like, certainly as a hiring manager, that's what I look at of, did you go to something for a project? Did you see that project through to completion or not? Did you just jump at the next promotional opportunity? And I think you can kind of see that on people's resumes, where they change organizations and they change classifications a lot. And that means that, within their organization, maybe there isn't the same appetite to promote them as outside of their organization. And certainly a mentor of mine told me that was kind of a red flag, are you always jumping organizations to get promoted? And why doesn't the organization that you're working for want to promote you?
I want to add to that because I know who's in our audience and I know also who's going to watch this recording. The exception for this is if you're a casual or a term and you're trying to get longer casuals, longer terms, or becoming an indeterminate. Because everyone who's smart, it's not everyone, but everyone who's smart knows that everybody wants to be indeterminate. So if you did short term, medium term, little bit of a term, then found a longer term, then left this term early to take an indeterminate, that's explicable. So I think that's the only time that that's really a completely different situation, and that's very easy to explain. So don't feel bad about like leaving a term partway through. Never feel bad. If you're taking an indeterminate, everyone should understand that.
And to add to what was said, I want to say, as a recruiter, I looked at a lot of resume. When do I feel uncomfortable sharing a resume with a manager? I feel like I have to, is when I'm not, like, it depends, like if you're changing every 4 months, 3 months, I become worried. because it's like, did someone was able to do your performance agreement, right? So those are things to think about. But if you're able, like Joshua said, if you're able to explain that you came here for a project, you work on something specific, and then you're ready to move on, and this is what you're seeking to work on file about diversity, they're implementing something or building a specific policy, and once you're done, you just want to move on to something else, and that's what you like, then it's understandable. If you're in operational work, and I'm thinking because of HR, I'm thinking about more of an HR ops world, where you're trying to just gain specific experience because you're not working on project most of the time. Let's say you're trying to do staffing ops, and then you want to try to do labor. So that again, we're able to see there's an explanation behind it, right? It's how are you explaining why you're moving so much, more than like how long are you staying in a position.
Wow. I'm learning so much. I'm like trying to digest, but then moderate at the same time. So awesome answers. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. What is the best approach if I'm thinking to apply for a secondment/assignment position and I'm asked for my manager's contact info as a reference, but I prefer not to use my manager as a reference, but I still feel okay to let my manager know beforehand that I'm applying for other positions?
Maybe I'll jump in. So you and your manager might have very different views on your capability and your potential. That is totally possible. I've worked for leaders who thought I was fantastic. I've worked for leaders who were happy when I left the organization. And that was totally fine because there were roles where I was not a good fit. There were roles where the leadership I was working with was not a good fit for me. So I think have that discussion with your manager when you're applying. There are jobs where they will insist that you use your current manager as a reference, or at least that they be able to validate your work. So have that discussion, see what they are comfortable saying about you and your work and your performance, and what they're not comfortable to speak about. Even if you don't put your manager as a reference, they can still request and require that. And I've had employees where they didn't put me as a reference as their manager, and I was still contacted, and it was much more of a shock in that case, where they said, okay, well, but we know you, so can we have a chat about whether this employee is a good fit? So just have that chat, like build that sort of rapport, I think, with your manager beforehand, so it's not awkward at the end of the day.
Love it. All right, I think we're good for that question. All right, moving on to the next one. Can you comment on why managers are hiring externally to fill higher level positions when they become available rather than promoting within the team? Who'd like to start? Loa.
Would you be able to repeat the question?
Of course. Can you comment on why managers are hiring externally to fill higher level positions when they become available rather than promoting within the team?
Well, I can try to answer that. So it depends on the strategy of the manager. And this is something that I would say to manager when they used to be my client. Like, if you want to hire outside, there's a reason why. Maybe the skill that you're looking for, you don't see it in your team, which is okay. It doesn't mean that your employee or your team are not strong enough. It's just that you're realizing there's a skill that you're missing. It's how you're seeing your team and how you're seeing the vision of the team. So the manager looks at his team, at the team and the deliverable, and then they're able to, by themselves, they'll be able to assess, how do I get there? What am I looking for? I think the responsibility of a manager is to explain something. Like, I would like a manager to explain to the team, to explain to me why they're going outside if they're not hiring me per se, or they're not promoting me, or they're not providing an acting opportunity. I think that's where having a transparent conversation comes in place. But it's mostly, there's a reason why. There's a lot of reason the way that they want to structure the team, or they know someone who has this particular competency in terms of leadership, maybe. So it always depends on the manager plan and strategy. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Loa. Andy?
There seems to be like a culture around wanting to make sure that there is like really fair hiring processes. So I've heard that, you know, even for folks who have been talent managed and have been deemed ready for promotion, they will still be made to get qualified in a pool for that level. And if you're in that job process, you do have to look at those other candidates in order for it to be fair. But yet we have the staffing flexibilities to not do it. So one thing that I have been mulling over myself is when we're thinking about equity, and because the context I've heard that it is in the context of you know, employment equity, how do we then make a little bit more better use of those staffing flexibilities instead of just assuming that the most fair process, which would kind of speak to me as more of equality for everyone, by making sure that that person is qualified in that pool, making sure we consider everyone, versus really looking at the individual and using those informal, non-advertised internal job. I'm sorry, Loa, you correct me. Internal, not advertised appointments, I think, to make sure that you're looking at the individual and you know, if you've just spent all that time talent managing them, why aren't you appointing them? But I think that's kind of a new concept. Like, how do we actually hire for equity and take an equitable approach? I think that's still kind of we're still trying to figure that out. So I think a part of it is this culture and these ideas between equality versus equity.
I'll just
Yeah,
add for a second that like, I think as a government, as the biggest employer in Canada, we should be taking in people at the mid levels, at the senior levels, and throughout the organization. It's not only about, you know, you start on day one and you're 23 years old and you build up your career for the next, you know, 38 years and retire. You know, sometimes it is about bringing in people who have an expertise that we need right then and there, right? With COVID, I'm sure there were a ton of people brought in from other organizations and experts on public health that we needed at the time. And I'm sure with, you know, the problems we'll deal with in the next decade, there are going to be needs to bring in people from outside as well. So I think it's about the capabilities of the organization, and sometimes that can be met internally and sometimes it needs to be met externally.
excellent insight. Thank you so much. Next question. The key takeaway from most sessions seems to be networking, but I struggle to find networking opportunities as a regional employee in a dispersed team that work predominantly with external stakeholders. What would you recommend for someone like me to increase network and improve career progression, aside from moving to the NCR?
Maybe I'll start with this one and then hand it off to Jen. Just so you know, Jen runs her own networking group in Moncton. So if you're in Moncton, you can join Jen's mixers that are hosted periodically. But just to say, I think it goes back to, you know, being a regional employee and making a name for yourself is key. So certainly when I was a regional employee and working remotely with an NCR team, you know, that's when I got involved in the Future Leaders of Ontario, which is the FYN network for the Ontario region. And I got involved just as a volunteer. I became the chair. I started doing cool stuff like, you know, doing YouTube video series and different stuff. And I started getting people who called me randomly from the GC. One of those was Taryn Wasson, who's quite connected. And he called me up. I was at the time an immigration manager sitting in Etobicoke outside of Toronto, sitting in my office. And he called up and said, hey, I don't know if you know who I am, but I work at Privy Council office. And we're really impressed with all the stuff that you're doing. And if there's a way we can help promote any of the work you're doing, you know, just let me know. You know, so I had created a brand for myself that was known well beyond, you know, that little immigration office in Etobicoke. And that really helped kind of propel my career. And I think, you know, you have to get outside of your bubble if you're a regional employee, especially when you're working with an NCR team or you're working in a very insular organization, and figure out, what are the other opportunities available, connect with, so we have regional networks in every province and in the NCR, and lots of them are needing new steering committee members, new co-chairs. We would love to have you involved as in our federal youth networks across Canada. There's a GC students network that's geared towards, new students in the GC. There are diversity inclusion networks that cover off every possible equity seeking group. You can get involved in those. You can get involved in the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network. And all of these things will help you to develop really that network of people, and also ensure that you have people to rely on. So when you have, questions or need advice, you don't feel stuck. You feel like you have people you can go to. Jen, other thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. So I thought I was fairly well networked prior to the pandemic. I have to say I had a very broad network, and it was one of the things that's really helped me develop my career. And I have to say that being in the region and during the pandemic, my network blew up. I now have friends in like every city. I'm going to do cross Canada tour and visit friends and have dinners and coffees and love it. So I don't think it matters where you are. I think it doesn't matter what kind of networking. It matters what kind of networking you want to do. So if you want to do in-person networking, contact your local, there's one in every province, youth network, there's one in every department. If there's not one, start one. Like Josh was saying, the Jen McDougall Mixer Christmas party was fabulous. And we are doing a new Christmas party in April. It hasn't been launched yet, but if you're in Moncton, you will hear about it. So yeah, like do it yourself. Public servants love to talk to other public servants. I think one of the things that we love to talk about is the cool work we do. People in our real lives don't understand what we do. And when we use our acronyms, they're really bored. But we all love to talk about the things that we do and how it overlaps and how we can collaborate. So networking, find a way that works for you, whether that's virtual, whether that's by joining a committee or a network, or if you like it in person, then you can definitely find events, follow the Federal Youth Network. We try to amplify all the things that we find that you would find interesting. So it's not just our stuff. We try to share with you other people's stuff so that you can stay engaged and involved and network.
Super well said. Thank you. I love the personalities and different perspectives this panel brings. Okay, so the next question, what is one single takeaway from each panelist for career planning today / right now? So I guess we can go in a circle. Who would like to start? Loa.
My takeaway is the power of social media. It is like when I was hearing Jen and Joshua talking about region, my first thing was like, how can we NCR empower region through social media? How can we I have calls from people from different regions because of the hybrid work, and they're asking me, Loa, how am I going to do? Am I going to lose my job? People from TBS working in Montreal, wondering how they're going to, are they going to be indeterminate employee their term? Are they going to be indeterminate? If they don't become indeterminate, do I know someone? Do I know what's happening in the region? But I think that like social media, like when I'm listening and with all the panel that we did with FYN, it's the power of social media that empower people. So that's my 2 cents. Yes.
Very good 2 cents. Thank you, Loa. Maybe Josh, you can go next.
Sure. I will say, spend more time interviewing your manager. Ask them good questions and not questions like, hey, I have vacation planned for April. Is it okay if I take it? Ask them about, the work culture. Ask them about how they like to engage with their employees. Ask them how often they do bilats with their staff. Ask them how many of their employees actually had performance appraisals, actually have learning plans. Ask them what the budget is for your own learning. Ask how much time you're allocated to work on volunteer networks or other priorities. And do that in advance, because you don't want to get stuck. I think we've all had jobs where we started and on like day 1 or day 3, we were like, well, this was a horrendous mistake. So try to avoid that by doing your research in advance and talking to people. Ask, a prospective team if you can talk to one of their team members. and say, and hear about their experience working with that team and whether it's a fit for you, because you don't want to be, it takes a long time to do any level of paperwork in the government. So you don't want to spend 3 months trying to move over to that job. When you move there and on day one, you're like, well, now I should look for my next job. But so do that research in advance.
Andy. Oh, no, wait, I can't hear you. Is that just me? That's so interesting. Is it just me that can't hear?
No, I can't hear you either.
Okay.
Should we skip over to Jen?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll go and then Andy can fix the tech. One piece is challenging for me. So I'm going to have to say, if I have one piece of advice, one takeaway is that anything is possible. Anything. You can enter the public service doing accounting and you can work for the space agency. You can cook the food in the prison and then you can do search and rescue in the ocean. There's nothing in the GC that you can't do. You can design video games, you can paint offices, you can serve fancy dinners with dignitaries. There's nothing you can't do. So if you hate your job right now, today, if you're like, thank God tomorrow's Friday, I feel bad for you. Get out of there, run, because there's such cool stuff. You have to do the work to find the cool stuff, to qualify for the cool stuff, and to get the cool stuff. But it's worth it to have a job you love. And so that is my word of advice, I think, is that anything is possible if you want to do the work.
I need to like put that on a t-shirt that we just said. Andy, I really hope it's working.
Testing.
Oh,
Woohoo. Cool.
Awesome.
Classic plug and unplug situation. So I just wanted to say really quickly about Josh's point on interviewing your manager. Lucy Ellis, the panelist who shared the stage with me for leadership that builds success, wrote all of the questions that she asks and why, and takes it from like a diversity and inclusion perspective as someone who's faced discrimination. So great resource. She actually made it for the session. So I highly recommend that. And then my piece of advice would be authenticity is so important. And I think as long as you're being authentic, the right things will come to you at the right time. So please don't feel like you have to be some sort of vision of what a public servant may be or look like as it may have traditionally looked in the past. We're really trying to change that across the board. And so being your authentic self, you'll eventually find your way. I know I did.
wow. Now I need 2 t-shirts because that was such a great last one.
We'll do one on the front and one on the back. We'll have those for sale at our next Fin Mixer.
Can we actually? That's awesome.
No, we can't actually check the values and ethics code. No, this is just a joke. This is just a joke.
Cut this out of the recording. I'm just kidding. So I do want to, start the close. However, is there any last words from the panelists? It is the last session of CBC 2023, the beginning of a new year. I know. I know that we had like some great wisdom right here with takeaways, but is there anything else you'd like to say, Jen?
As the designer of Career Bootcamp, I'm going to beg you to fill out the survey that we're going to send you tomorrow. So not because I want to hear how great it was, although I do, because I know it was great. And we had the best speakers and we try so hard to bring in new speakers, diverse perspectives and all of that. But what we need to know is if we're teaching you things that are interesting for you, because maybe you just want to hang out with us and hear our funny stories, but like, are you learning things that are helping you in your career? What would you like to learn next? What should we add to our curriculum? Do you like this format? So we can only help you if you tell us how to help you. So help us help you by filling out the survey. And if there's anything that the survey doesn't cover, like send us a DM on social media. We're so easy to find. So please tell us how we can help you with your career, because that's our job and that's what we want to do.
Thank you, Jen. The other panelists, any last words?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just chime in on the volunteering part. I saw there was a question around how early should I volunteer as part of my job from day one. look for an opportunity to get involved in a young professionals network, diversity inclusion network, any committees within work. Find a way to make your job not the only thing that you are working on, but one of the things you are working on. And find a manager who's supportive of that. Loa.
I want to add on to what Josh has just said, because participate in any network, even if you don't understand what's happening. I remember when I used to work at TBS Renaissance, my English was not really that progressive, that good, but I would go to the meeting and I remember people were talking about governance. I didn't understand anything of what they were talking about. I would write words on a paper and then try to understand what it meant later on. And I would never speak because I was too shy and I didn't want to sound stupid. But today I found the courage to be on the Visible Minority Network. And I do have to say it's because of my first step a couple of years ago, just being there and just hearing how people are talking, what they're saying, even if I don't understand. At one point I started understanding, and then I started seeing the value of those networks. So yes, day one, just sign up on something and just show up there, say your name, and if you want to stay quiet the whole time, stay quiet, but be there. For what it is for the Career Bootcamp, I want to say congratulations to the whole team. I mean, when I looked at the picture that you posted, this is diversity. This is what I really hope when I walk into a building to see. When I'm on my, when we go in person in the office, I want to see that diversity at every floor, right? So really congratulations. It really touched me when I saw that, because I really root for diversity. In diversity, that's where you're going to find all the richness, all the knowledge. People from diverse perspective will bring so much to Canadian. So congratulations. Good job, team.
Thank you so much, Loa. I know we're at time. I do want to give the chance to Andy. I know you ended off your last question. Super awesome. Anything you like to say, Andy? No, the best. All right. Well, we do have one last poll for everyone, the last one of the year for CBC, that is. It's anonymous and the answers will not be shared. So yeah, don't forget to take advantage of the networking opportunity with other government employees on the Wonder Me from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern today, right after this session. You can find the link to the networking event on the VExpo. Additionally, all resources will be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be posted on our YouTube channel in 24 hours. A huge thank you to our amazing panelists for their thoughtful answers and for bringing Career Bootcamp to a close on such a high note. It's been a privilege to serve as your moderator today for the final event. Thank you for attending Career Bootcamp and have a great day.